أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. Most welcome back to the Rise of the Novel, our lovely course about the beginnings of the English novel. I have tried in this course, in this lecture, and at the very start, to try to give you a summary of at least the last lecture. So you will remember the information that we concluded the last lecture with. This is one. You will find this to be new in this lecture. Also new in this lecture is the first slide, in which you have all the contents of the slide. So you know very well and exactly what the lecture as a whole talks about. As you can see here, this is our fourth lecture, and we are still introducing the rise of the English novel, how the English novel came into being. As I said before in the introductory preliminary lecture, the first 5 lectures will be devoted to an introduction about the background information that is relevant to the age and the literature of the 18th century, which saw the rise and appearance of the English novel. As I told you, you have in the first slide the contents of the lecture. Here we will talk about the passive effects of the Industrial Revolution, and we'll also talk about the positive effects of the Industrial Revolution, passive and positive. And as you can notice, these two are the last things, almost the last things that we dealt with at the end of the third lecture. Also at the end of the last lecture, we started talking about the novel, and we gave it a definition or some definitions, saying that it talks about reality and it has to be written in prose, not in verse, in order for it to be differentiated from poetry or drama. We are going to deal also in this lecture with the reasons behind the emergence of the English novel. Another point is when and where the novel came into being, the origins of the novel, the masters of the English novel, who is the father or mother of the English novel. About 8 points, very simple and very easy, and you will quickly understand what is to be understood, because most of the pieces of information here come from the last lecture, which is lecture number 3. Okay, ready? Will we start? Lovely. Some of the passive effects of the Industrial Revolution, and this is of course an abbreviation for the words Industrial Revolution. And passive is the opposite of positive. Passive is bad, positive is good. Effects, results. The results of the Industrial Revolution came already in the 17th century and in the 18th century. Lots of engines, lots of machines, lots of factories, change. In the past it was stagnation, now there is change, of course. And as everything else in life, it had its passive side and its positive side. The passive side, we will have to deal with a number of things. The Industrial Revolution had its demerits. The same thing. Demerits is the same as passive effects. Like what? Environmental pollution. First thing is environmental pollution. As we saw in the slide, in the other slide, when we began talking about the Industrial Revolution, we saw factories sending lots of smoke into the air. And that smoke, of course, polluted the air. It made the air that we breathe dirty, not clear enough, not clean enough. And that, of course, affected the chests of people in the 18th century, and their health deteriorated as a result of that. Why did we have pollution? Because of the spread of machines and factories. Someone can ask me a question: what is the importance of us studying pollution and environmental results of the Industrial Revolution and machines and factories? Are we studying the novel, the rise of the novel, or are we studying history and geography? I repeat the same question from the other times we met. It is because these things affected the novel, affected the writing of the novel. When the writer began writing his novels, the most important things that he looked at were the problems in society. What kinds of problems will he deal with? He will deal with such things. Because when the health of people deteriorated and became bad, individuals or individual persons got ill and sick and were not active participants in society, and they had to be admitted to hospitals, and there were no adequate hospitals, so it was a real social problem. And the writer of the novel, as we agreed before, came in order to criticize the problems of the society in which he lived or she lived. Another point: poor health conditions at the start of the century. No hospitals, no doctors, just superstition. Remember, we talked about superstition again. Superstition means that people who did not study medicine, who did not have any knowledge at all about diseases, were responsible for the treatment of the health of many citizens. There were no doctors, no hospitals, and that, of course, was a very bad thing, and it affected also the health of people. Materialism. What is materialism? Materialism is two things. First of all, money. In that age, at that time, all people found it easy to work more, to go to factories and to other institutions in order to work, so as to change their social conditions from being poor classes into being middle classes, better classes, higher classes, having more money. And there was individualism, and there was colonialism, and there was the whole world opening up in front of them. You see, England became a superpower, the empire over which the sun never set. And man at that time felt that he could really realize himself as an individual, traveling, having lots of money, having whatever needs he had in front of him. He could achieve everything. So he stopped with the church stopping to affect people. So man stopped to think of what is going to happen later after he dies. What was it that man thought of? The present moment. How I can enjoy myself. How I can achieve all the pleasures that I dream of. I will remind you of this when we study the novel. We will find Robinson, the hero of Robinson Crusoe, all the time looking for pleasure, all the time looking for achievement of his own desires. He has parents and he has religion. He tells us that he is religious, that he believes in God, that he likes morality and religion and prayers and reading in the Bible and so on. But as we will discover, the most important thing for him is to achieve his own goals, to feel happy, to have pleasure. Okay? So that is called materialism. Money, pleasures, plus believing only in the things that you have in front of you, that you can touch, things that you can touch, things that you can see, things you can interact with. So if you tell me there is a pen that is blue and that is made in Germany in a certain bookshop near King Faisal University, next to King Faisal University, you talk to me about it, I will not believe it. I will not believe what you are saying until I go there, find the pen, buy the pen, use it. Do you understand? But talking to me about it, forget it. Now people only believed what they saw, and this makes it easy for us to understand why they did not believe in religion so much at that time. Okay? Also, lack of interest in education. Everyone went to work originally in order to gain more money. So, yeah, they began to be interested later in education. They began to search for schools and universities around them, and it was easy to travel later, and they took the train and the bus to Birmingham and Leeds and Oxford and Cambridge and all the great cities and universities in England. It was easy later, but at the start everyone went to work, and even children, even women. So no one was interested in education, neither children nor parents, because parents wanted their children to have more money by working. See, women and children went to work, and novels that began to be written at that time started to talk about that issue. The work of women, the work of children, the weakness of the family structure. If you look at the previous elements together, you will see that the result, what is the result behind all this? What happens when women go to work? What happens when children go to work? What happens when every member of the family needs money and believes only in what is to be seen? What happens is that the family is weak, becomes weak. There is no time in which the family could sit together and have lunch and talk. While the parents could talk to the children and advise them and explain things and correct concepts. No time, no such gathering, and the direct result for that was that the structure of the family fell weak. It became quite weak. Poverty of some classes of people. With ages like this, with changes like this, it is quite normal actually to find different classes of people who are high up on the ladder, the social ladder, and people who are less, and people who are less. That is quite normal. It is much more so with circumstances like this and with ages like this. So some classes of people got very poor. Those who could not achieve work, those who did not have the ability to work, they became very poor indeed. So society suffered from problems: lack of education, work of women and children, the weakness of the family structure, and here poverty of some classes, plus hunger. That's another result. All such matters, are related. Hunger, diseases, deaths. We are mentioning those things because these are the topics that novels in the 18th century, after the rise of the novel, talk about. They talk about such matters. Some of the passive effects of the Industrial Revolution. So, as we saw at the start of the lecture will talk about the passive effects of the Industrial Revolution, and now it will talk about, let's talk about what? The other side, some of the positive effects of the Industrial Revolution. Some of the good things, and that is why you can see the sign, the mark I have given you at the start of each element. That was a nice thing. It changed society from stagnation to turmoil. The first and most important result of the Industrial Revolution is that it changed society completely from a stagnant society. We talked about stagnation before. Stagnation means stillness, means water that does not move. This is stagnation. That was the life of people in the past, before the Industrial Revolution. Everyone lived on the same plot of land that Alexander Pope talked about. Happy the man whose wish and care a few paternal acres bound, content to breathe his native air in his local ground. That was the state of affairs in the past. But with the Industrial Revolution, that stagnation moved into another stage. It became turmoil. Turmoil is not just change. It's a lot of change. A lot of hustle and bustle. And remember, we're talking about what? The positive effects of the Industrial Revolution. Positive, okay? Someone can ask me, is this a positive effect? Yes. Change, movement is better than stagnation. It made it easier for people to get in touch, to communicate, to meet, to visit. Earlier, everyone was cornered in his own small piece of land, having no ability at all to travel and communicate with others. Now it was a golden chance for everyone to meet and to talk. Means of transportation became easier because means of transportation depend on machines and engines. I mean, like buses, trains, boats, they began to be invented at that period of time and later in the 19th century. The Industrial Revolution also made traveling and exploration easier. If you could move from where you live into another city or even another country, then traveling became a joy, it became a pleasure. And exploration, that is to say, the desire to understand and to discover new places and new countries, got in control of all people in England at that time. It was the age of exploration, the age of traveling. It created more resources of knowledge like books and magazines, and this is a very important issue as well. Books were written, magazines were published. People began to read more and more. In the past, in the Middle Ages, in the Dark Ages, it was not like that. Reading was difficult. Not enough books were published. Not enough magazines were published. Actually, books were written by hand, manuscripts. The printing press was invented, and after that books began to be published and also magazines, and there was a reading public that was ready to consume, to read the novels that were being published little by little. So these are some of the positive effects. Now this is a question, as we are used to every other time. I give you a question about the same pieces of information in order for you to know how I design questions. You could simply follow this, and if you have any questions, you may ask me anytime. I mean, at the times specified in the course file. So this is a question. The Industrial Revolution changed society, caused stagnation, or didn't change England? Is that easy? It is a piece of information built on the slides we have just finished. The Industrial Revolution changed society, of course. It came to change it. It came to change the stagnation that was prevalent and widespread in the past, and make of it what I described as turmoil or change. Another question on the same pieces of information. The Industrial Revolution made what easy? It made knowledge, books, magazines, they became easier. Is that true or false? All you have to do is say true or false. Of course, this piece of information is true. Same thing we can ask about the slides before. The Industrial Revolution made transportation easier. Yes, that is also true. So knowledge and transportation became easier. Okay, the Industrial Revolution created more resources of knowledge like books and magazines. Correct. So all these pieces of information are correct, and these are examples of questions that can be asked. Now, how the novel came into being. How the novel came into being. Of all the literary genres, what is meant by how the novel came into being? How it began. We said one of the big answers is out of these elements: the Industrial Revolution, the Religious Revolution, the American Revolution, the French Revolution. All those developments led to the beginning of the novel. If you look at poetry and drama, you will see that the novel is different. The novel is the last major literary form to have developed in terms of history. It is the last major one. It did not develop like them at the start. It came as the last literary form. Poetry is a literary form. Drama is a literary form. Poetry and drama came first, perhaps drama and then poetry. This is controversial, which came first, but these two came, of course, before the novel. So the novel is the last major literary form. I would make a question now about this. I would say, for example, a question like this. Now, I could say, poetry, drama, the novel, okay, is the last major literary form. See how simple this is? Very simple. What is the statement? The novel is the last major literary form to have developed in terms of history. Which came first in history? Poetry, drama, or the novel? Which came last? I'm asking about what now? The last major literary form. Which one came at last? It is, of course, the novel. The novel is the last major literary form to have come into being after poetry and drama. There was plenty of fiction or of imaginary works like epics, ballads, anecdotes, myths, fables, folk tales, legends, and the like. There were things that can be considered novels, but they are not novels because they do not have the features of the novel, simply because of that. For example, the epics written by Homer in the 6th century BC are an example of the existence of fictional literature well before the novel proper. So there was something like the novel, but the novel as we define it now, as books define it now, did not exist until later in the last part of the 17th century and the first part of the 18th century. But there were some works like epics, ballads, anecdotes, myths, fables, short stories, short pieces of writing that had some fictional elements, but they were not called novels. Okay? A question about the same previous slide. Say true or false. Before the novel came into being, before it arose, there was plenty of fiction like epics, ballads, anecdotes, and myths. From the same slide, the same pieces of information, this is true. Okay? This is true, as you can see from the mark. Before the novel, and look at this. This is true and this is wrong. This is wrong. Before the novel arose, before the novel came into being, notice before, not after. Before the novel arose, there was plenty of fiction like history and geography. This is wrong. There was no plenty of fiction. Plenty of fiction, yes, in this first example. In the second example, I'm saying history and geography. You have to take care. History and geography are not fiction. They are not fiction. They are not the novel. Epics, ballads, anecdotes, myths are examples of fiction, but history and geography are not. So this piece of information is wrong. The rise of the novel is due to, why did it come into being? Okay, the rise of the novel, the rise of the middle classes in Western Europe. There is a number of elements. I said early in this lecture that people began to have money and to move on the social ladder from being poor classes of people into being, or lower classes into being, middle classes in Western Europe, which means that they could read. They have the power to buy books and novels and magazines in which novels were published, and that gave rise to the novel. They encouraged the existence of the novel. Profound social and economic changes brought the novel into popular prominence. There was a lot of improvements socially and economically, and that led to the rise of the novel as well. Advances into the technology of printing. I also said that once the printing machine was invented, lots of books were published, and there was a growing population of readers. Changes in the modes of distribution and literacy rates brought books and pamphlets to populations excluded from education, like working classmen and women. So we could say that working classmen and women could read novels, and that made the novel easier to start. Authors became free agents in the literary marketplace, dependent on popular sales for success and sustenance. Authors also sold their books and contributed to the widespread of novels in bookshops and in magazines. Reasons behind the emergence of the novel. Question: the novel arose due to the rise of the middle classes. I would choose one or two of these and ask you about them. Yes, this is true. The middle classes appeared in Western Europe, and this gave rise to the novel. Profound social and economic changes made the novel appear. That is true. Advances into technology. Yes, this is true. So this is true. The question is, of course, true or false. The spread of poetry. Did the spread of poetry help the novel to emerge? No. Poetry was there before the novel, you see, but the novel did not come into being as a result of that. It came as a result of the things above. Other results, other effects were there that contributed to the rise of the novel, but poetry was not one of them. Also, wars did not help the novel to come into being. Do you understand? Okay. Also, the decline of drama. At that time, drama was not very famous, and when drama becomes little in importance or fame, the novel grows in fame and importance. Poetry also was in a stage of decadence. So we have the word decline of drama, and we have the decadence of poetry. Decline of drama, decadence of poetry. Both drama and poetry were less in importance. They were not great, they were not important, they were not powerful literary kinds, and that is why it was time for the novel to start appearing on the literary scene in England at that time. In this slide, I'm saying that the novel emerged, it appeared in England because of the weakness of drama and the weakness of poetry. Never mind what you read here if you don't understand, for example, the License Act of 1737 and moribund and so on. No, just understand what I'm highlighting here, the decline of drama and the decadence of poetry. The question now is this: when and where? When did the novel start? When, I'm asking about the time. See? When, and then where, the place. When did it start originally? In the first half of the 18th century, 17-something, in England. Early works similar to the novel date back to the Elizabethan literature. There are samples, examples like the novel, but they are not called novels, and that appeared earlier in Elizabethan literature. There was also some effects by the Spanish novels. There were also some effects by the Spanish novel that affected the rise of the novel in England, like Don Quixote by Cervantes. Sir Philip Sidney's Arcadia, Afra Ben's Oroonoko, or The Royal Slave in 1688. So this is a real novel. It's the first, critics say that this can be the first novel to have been published in England. But look at the date, 1688, that is to say the end of the 17th century. And John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress also at about the same time. So Afra Ben, the author of Oroonoko, and John Bunyan, the author of Pilgrim's Progress, these are the two works that can be said to have preceded the emergence of the novel. So when did it start? In the first half of the 18th century. Where? In England. Okay? The dominant genre in world literature, the novel, is a relatively young form of imaginative writing. It is a young compared to poetry and drama because it is not very old in history. How many years? Almost 250 years old in England. Its rise to preeminence has been striking. After sparse beginnings in 17th century England, novels grew rapidly in production by the 18th century and the 18th centuries. It became the primary form of popular entertainment until today. So from this slide, what is important? It is important to say that the novel is young. It is not old. How old is it? Approximately 250 years. Let us have this question. Okay, the origins. How old is the English novel? 100 years, 400 years, 250 years. Of course, the right answer is number 3, 250 years. We are approaching the end of the novel. Please pay attention. Between these years, 1740 and 1800, hundreds of novels of all kinds were written. A lot of novels were published in this 60 years, this span of time. The masters, now we are talking about the masters, you see. The masters, that is to say, the most important novelists. Who are the masters of the English novel? About 5. Defoe, Daniel Defoe, Richardson, Fielding, Smollett, and Sterne. Please remember these names: Defoe, Richardson, Fielding, Smollett, and Sterne. Other people are there, but they are not as important. Who is the greatest of them all? Henry Fielding. Okay? Question: true or false? Say true or false, please. The greatest masters of the English novel are, I gave them to you in the other slide. Who are they? Defoe, Richardson, Fielding, Smollett, and Sterne. There were other novelists, of course, but these are the most important ones. Okay? True or false? The greatest masters of the English novel are Defoe, Richardson, Fielding, Smollett, and Sterne. This is true, as you can see. And this is wrong. Why is it wrong? Let us read. The greatest masters of the English novel are Shaw and Shakespeare. This piece of information is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because both George Bernard Shaw and William Shakespeare are famous dramatists. They are writers of drama, plays, not novelists. The greatest masters of the English novel are, for example, Defoe, Richardson, Fielding, Smollett, and Sterne. Right? Not Bernard Shaw or William Shakespeare. Who is the father or mother of the English novel? The first significant novel in English was Afra Ben's Oroonoko, as we said before. This is a woman. She wrote Oroonoko at the end of the 17th century, but the novel does not have all the elements of the novel. It talks about the violence and cruelty of man and the idea of the noble savage. Don't worry about this. I'm interested in what the father or mother of the English novel. So we could roughly say that the mother of the English novel is Afra Ben. What is the novel she published? Oroonoko. When was it published? 1688. Okay? This is all I want you to learn in this slide. The novel also talks about man's essential freedom and about women's rights in a relatively very early age. In this way, it can be said that Afra Ben antedated Daniel Defoe. She came before Daniel Defoe, of course, almost 30 years before he began to write novels. Question now. Oroonoko was written in the this is the date it was written in, 1688. And this is the 17th century, of course. Now I want you to answer. Was it written in the 17th century or the 18th century or the 19th century? It was written in the 17th century. Who is the father? We talked about the mother of the English novel. Now the father of the English novel is Daniel Defoe. What is the novel he published? Robinson Crusoe. When was it published? 1719. Okay? So he is often regarded as the foundation of the modern tradition of the novel. They talk about fundamental ways and lifestyles of the 18th century. They reflect the merits and demerits of the 18th century novel. Very important novels, especially Robinson Crusoe, which we are going to study together in the course, in the body of this course, inshallah. As I promised, we have been talking today about these elements in front of you. Look, the passive effects of the Industrial Revolution, the passive effects, and then the positive effects of the Industrial Revolution. We also talked about how the novel came into being as a result of the revolutions, the industrial, the religious, the American, the French, the advance in technology, the spread of knowledge, and all these elements. Reasons behind the emergence of the novel, also a continuation on the same subject. When, that is say, the time the novel came into being, and then where, the place it came into being, the origins, the first books that were called novels, the masters, the most important ones, the 5 ones that we talked about, and then the mother of the English novel and the father of the English novel, and until we meet inshallah again with a study of the last elements of the age that affected the rise of the novel. Have the best of times. See you inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.